stuff moves through a system from extraction to production to distribution to consumption to disposal. All together, it's called the materials economy. And you know what I found out? That is not the whole story. There is a lot missing from this explanation. For one thing, this system looks like it's fine, no problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis.
So my oldest son comes home from school the other day and he tells me he's been watching this movie, The Story of Stuff. And I tell you, I couldn't hide that I was bothered by it. I'm pretty sure I rolled my eyes, I made a face. That made my son feel better because he was bothered by what he'd heard presented as facts in a classroom. See, about a year or so ago, I debunked this movie after a viewer tipped me off that it was being used in school. So when my son told me he watched it in class, I was prepared to tell him why the movie is just plain wrong. It's not just wrong on the political slant, it's wrong based on the facts. This is a concern because this movie is shown in schools across North America. I found it listed or mentioned on school board websites across the country, and it's likely being shown in your local school and taught as a fact-based analysis of what's wrong with our world. Once you see the errors that I'll point out, you'll agree that no student should see this. Now, I could object to this movie based solely on the politics of it. The Story of Stuff is a propaganda film for the hard-left American political viewpoint. I could object to the fact that this is a film that uses mostly American examples that don't really apply to Canadian students. But let's stick to objecting based on the facts that the movie's producers put forward to support their argument.
For one thing, this system looks like it's fine, no problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis. And the reason it's a system in crisis is it's a linear system and we live on a finite planet. And you cannot run a linear system on a finite planet indefinitely.
Now, I take issue with this idea that we live on a finite planet and that we run a linear system. It's one theory of how the world works, and the producers use this theory to try and convince the students watching it that we're running out of everything, and that's why we need to be worried. Unfortunately for the producers, the world creates more water, it grows more trees, and the wind continues to blow. We find new resources all the time. We find new ways of using resources, more efficient ways, cleaner ways of running our planet all the time. So next, the producers get into telling the young students that everything is rigged against the little guy.
Let's start with the government. Now, my friends tell me I should use a tank to symbolize the government, and that's true in many countries and increasingly in our own. After all, more than 50% of our federal tax money is now going to the military.
Claiming that 51% of U.S. tax dollars go to the military is patently false. Now, the film's producers put out an annotated script with footnotes to back up their claims, so I looked at those claims. They cite the War Resisters League. That's an anti-military group that takes out Social Security and Medicare spending so that they can shrink the U.S. budget and thus increase military spending as a portion of the budget. Is this accurate? Not at all. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office puts spending on health care by the U.S. federal government at $856 billion. Social Security spending, $725 billion. Spending on the military, $699 billion. Less than both Social Security and health care. And I should point out that this was before Obamacare even took effect. Back in 2008, 2009, when this movie was in production, military spending accounted for roughly 20% of U.S. government spending, and that was while the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were both in full swing. Next, the movie moves on to claiming that we as a society are trashing the planet based on how we acquire natural resources. And at this point, the narrator, Annie Leonard, moves into pure polemics.
We'll start with extraction, which is a fancy word for natural resource exploitation, which is a fancy word for trashing the planet. What this looks like is we chop down the trees, we blow up mountains to get the metals inside, we use up all the water, and we wipe out the animals.
That claim is nothing but fantasy, but it's a statement designed to evoke feelings of guilt and remorse in the student so that they'll change their ways. It's not, however, based on fact, and neither are her subsequent claims about forests.
Where I live in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left.
What do you think that means, less than 4% of our original forests? This statement would lead the viewer to believe that those forests have been chopped down. That would be false, but it's the impression the film's producers want to give. The footnote to support this claim reads that 95 to 98% of forests in the continental United States have been logged at least once since settlement by Europeans. Now, in case you've never been near a logging operation, chopping down a tree, logging a forest, or taking down a whole bunch of trees, that doesn't mean the forest disappears. Even in natural cycles, old trees die, fall down, new timber grows. Trees are one of the most renewable resources of all renewable resources, and we're not losing our forests in Canada, and neither are our American friends. The National Forestry Database estimates that 43% of Canada's land mass is covered by trees in one form or another. The World Bank puts Canada's forests at 34% of land mass, America's forests 33% of their land mass. And less than 1/2% of Canada's forests are harvested each year. But Miss Leonard, the narrator of the movie, claims 80% of the world's original forests are gone. Another spurious claim, one that, well, it would require no tree ever be cut down, no forest even partially logged, so that they're still original forests. The reality is that the United Nations pegs the world's forest as covering 30% of the Earth's land mass. That's after accounting for deserts, savannas, farmland, cities, and every other use there is for land. The movie claims that we are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Funny, this claim is undermined by the fact that environmentalists have been making it for years, and yet the number of people on the planet continues to rise, and so does life expectancy. If Ms. Leonard was right, it would be going in the opposite direction. And by the way, she offers no facts to back up her claim. I could go on pointing out more factual errors in the film, but I want to turn to the problem of such a political production being shown in class. And quite simply, regardless of which political slant it has, this just shouldn't happen. I'm not saying political issues can never come up in class, but when one side is presented as fact and the other side not at all, that's a problem. This film also engages in all-out class warfare, pitting those with money against those without. There's also a strong anti-capitalist tone and a dismissal of corporations. A couple of final thoughts on this. The teacher that showed this to my child, he's a member of one of the biggest public pension plans going. The Ontario Teachers Pension Plan boasts that it holds $195 billion in assets. Teachers is a major investor in some of the biggest banks in the world, the kind of corporations this movie trashes. The pension plan owns shares in Barrick Gold and Gold Corp, two of the major mining companies in the world that frequently mine in third world countries. Teachers is also a significant shareholder in ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, TransCanada, Enbridge, and other companies involved in extracting oil and gas, or, as the story of Stuff puts it, trashing the place. Now, if the teacher that showed this to my son believed what it says, he'd give up his pension. But I doubt that's going to happen. This little movie has been seen by millions of school kids around the world. It starts off as a good premise. We can all be too obsessed with our stuff. And if it stayed on the message of not living a materialistic life, I'd say good job, show it to kids. But instead, this is a movie that takes snippets of fact, lies, and innuendo and presents it all as fact. This movie, this very political movie, should never be shown to kids at all. Ever. You need to find out if this is in your school or your school district, and if so, push to have it removed based on the factual errors. The kids deserve better.